See this? That is 10 Roman coins. If I found these all together in the ground, they'd officially constitute an archaeological hoard. So imagine finding this many coins. 55,000 to be precise. This is the single largest site we've ever attempted to investigate. And as usual, in Neighbours, nobis cognoscendum est. It's a fantastic notion, this idea that underneath this field is an entire Roman town. But when I look at it, all I can see is the sweep of the stubble. I can't see any lumps and bumps or anything.
Yeah, it doesn't look like much, does it really, Tony? But actually, this is the site of a Roman town called Cunetio. But its site was lost for almost 2,000 years until aerial photographs in the 1940s showed unmistakable parch marks. Ditches, big stone wall, Roman buildings, Roman street.
So Trench 1 is going in across a break in the southern wall, where the team suspects we might find the gateway and a watchtower.
There's our first Roman find. I'd say that's a piece of Roman pot.
Yeah, without doubt, that's from Dorset. So yeah, that's probably going to be later Roman.
I didn't want an address for it.
Despite centuries of destructive ploughing on this field, GEO-PHYS are producing cracking results, and that's reflected in the archaeology. Phil, how are we getting on?
Superbly, Tony. Just as on the geophysics, we've got the wall here, it ends about here, and then I think we're going into the ditch. It's much darker through there, and it gets chalky around there, and at the back, round the corner, we've got this big black blob with pottery, and we've got bone on it. I think that's our pit. And apart from that, we've got other bits of pottery, we've got coins. It really is all coming together.
So already it looks as though our Roman town is beginning to appear in the field. How much more is there? We'll find out later. Oh, and of course, this being time team, it looks like it's going to bucket down any minute. John, what is that contraption?
This is Jimmy in the future. We've got such a big site here. The only way we decided we could tackle it was to try this new bit of kit that the Swedish have developed. And basically, it's radar on wheels.
Jimmy, is this usually used on archaeological sites?
No, this has been designed with utility mapping in mind, so looking for pipes and cables. Hasn't actually been used on archaeology in Britain before.
Well, that's quite exciting.
It really is a first, and it is absolutely amazing.
And as the predicted rain starts to fall, Trench 1 gives us our first classy find.
Ah, yeah. It's a spoon. Yeah, that's the handle. You've got the little drop, and then you've got just part of the bowl. Would have been a circular one, and they tend to be earlier rather than late Roman, so more likely 2nd century, early 3rd.
These types of spoon were usually silvered or tin-plated, and were a cut above the regular day-to-day wooden variety. And equally lavish objects were unearthed here during the 50s and 60s. Unfortunately, the excavation notes were never published, but the amazing finds did make it to a local museum.
David, one of the problems we've got on this site is a small amount of digging that has taken place as they've been written up, but you've got all the finds in the museum.
That's right, and you see them all here. Here is a piece of stone from an arch. It would have sat like that as a column, and the arch for the gateway would have sprung from there. Just shows how monumental the building was. And then, back here, we have some painted wall plaster, and you can see the decoration, the designs on here.
So, do we know where that's from?
I know it's from Trench BB, and I'm not quite sure where that's from, so that's something hopefully you will be able to find out.
So it does suggest that there's a building of high status, presumably with plaster, maybe with a hypercourse, that kind of thing?
Could be.
Back out on site, we've now identified a second target.
We're in the middle of the walled town, and there's this massive building which we think is a mansio.
Oh, that's one of those hotel-type things that high-status people used to stay in when they were wandering around the country.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's a building made up with a series of rooms, and it's ideal for radar to work on. So we thought this is the best target for us to try. If we look at Mike's computer, we can actually see the results on screen already. I mean, you've seen these time slices before. We've put all the results together, and what we can see are several rooms here, and we think this is part of the mansio. So the plan is to put a trench across one of the walls from inside the room into the courtyard, see if we can get some dating evidence and see the state of preservation.
So our investigation expands from Trench 1, looking for the southern gateway, to Trench 2, which takes in this substantial building in the interior. And the radar results are good, as we're straight down onto the archaeology.
Your work here is done, I think, Ian.
But with Trench 2 looking to ID this building, I'm concerned that we're overly confident it's a Mansio.
Well, in the aerial photographs, there is a very clear, large building which has lots of rooms within it arranged around a courtyard. And these you very often find in towns. And so this looks like a Mansio. It's in the right kind of place for a Mansio. Therefore, it's highly likely to be one.
What do you mean it's in the right place? Do you mean that it's slap bang in the middle of the town inside the walls?
Well, you actually have to imagine that the walls aren't there. Because if they're sort of 4th century, then the Mansio was probably built before this. So what I mean is it's right in the centre of where all the roads are coming together, all the major roads are coming together and joining. What you're providing is somewhere for people to eat, somewhere for people to sleep, and somewhere for them to change horses. So you have a whole sequence of bedrooms. Very often, or at least in the earlier stages of them, the bedrooms were of 2 different sizes as to whether you had important officials staying or the common or garden soldier or messenger or postman staying.
If what we have got is a Mansio, what does that tell us about this site?
It tells us that it did have a formal function within the Roman imperial system.
If they're right, then Cunetio was built around a Roman travel lodge, with important visitors coming and going on a daily basis.
Is that all coins you got there?
Yep, I've got 13 here.
Where have they come from?
They've come from the spoil heaps just round this trench.
But they've all just come from this trench?
Yep.
I mean, have you got any dates for them?
Well, there's one here that dates to about 270, and that's a coin of Gallienus. But the rest of them really tightly date to the middle of the 4th century, so around 320 to 340 AD.
I mean, I suppose, it's a lovely little collection, but the sheer fact that it's all from the spoil tip, it's all unstratified, it actually only tells us that the Romans were here in Cunetio at that time.
That's true, but the interesting thing here is that 20-year period that the coins come from. And I'm wondering whether perhaps at some point a plough has hit a little coin hoard, perhaps?
Another one?
Yeah, another coin hoard from Cunetio.
See, when you say that, I was thinking this morning, Tony said he had a handful of 10 coins, and he said that constitutes a hoard. You got 13.
Yeah, so what we're looking at here is another case of potential treasure.
Wow.
But the weather has caused one major setback. Rain has seeped into the radar machine's computer, forcing it to retreat from sight. GEO-PHYS have lost their ultimate weapon. Man will have to triumph where machine has failed. Under the marquee, though, work goes on unhindered. Matt, can I come in your trench?
Yeah, quick, get under the tent.
It's getting worse and worse out there.
Miserable, isn't it?
I think you're in the best place. This is where we thought there might be a Mansio, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure we've got it. Over here we've got this lovely packed chalk surface. In the middle, we're just starting to get the stones of this wall coming up, and that goes straight down this way, behind me there. On that side, we've got this courtyard area, or yard surface, looks like, and on top of it, in front of Christo there, can you see stone roof tiles? Slid straight off the roof and landed right there.
So, we know we've got a building.
Yeah.
We know it's Roman.
Yeah.
But we don't know it's a Mansio, do we?
True, but this fits in perfectly with the geophysics, so I'm pretty sure that we've got it.
So you're happy to continue?
Oh yeah, I'm well up for it.
I'm not surprised you're the only dry people on the site.
We've clearly got a massive building here, and the problem is there's just so much going on. Unpicking it is just so difficult.
But unpick it we must, so we put another trench in on the strongest anomalies in the building. A Mansio would likely have had both a bathhouse and heated rooms. So if we can find them, then we've as good as got our ID. Back over in Trench 1, Phil's confident he's finally found the gateway.
What I've got here is the butt end of the wall that John got on his geophysics. You can see here these flints set into the mortar, where the flints that way are just in loose soil.
The GEO-PHYS team, still without their speedy radar on wheels, are putting in the miles and getting the acres done.
That should line up with those defences.
And their survey is gradually adding key features to the rich tapestry of our 3D map. But 20 metres away, on the other side of the Roman courtyard, Matt has at last pinned a date to the Mansio.
You know, Matt, the thing about this trench was it had a great plan, didn't it? And it absolutely matched the geophysics like a dream. but we didn't actually have any dating for any of it. But looks like it's changed.
Yeah, indeed. We've just done this tiny little hole up against the wall here. Must be about half a metre by about 30 centimetres. We've got pottery from the floor itself, this chalk floor that I'm kneeling on. We've got pottery from the kind of layer below the chalk floor, and there's another layer below that, and there's pottery coming out of that as well, so there's plenty to choose from.
Well, just on quick inspection, the immediate thing is it's not late Roman. You know, Samian ware is always classically sort of 1st and 2nd century AD. That looks like to be 2nd century. So it does suggest that these floors are being laid around about the 2nd century AD, but there's absolutely no late Roman pottery at all, and nor is there any sort of later floor levels. But it sort of suggests, doesn't it, that this building was built around the 2nd century AD, but perhaps by the time that the stone walls were going up and the fancy house in the far corner was being built, this could be out of use.
Yeah, pretty sure it was.
So before huge walls dominated Canetio, the heart of the town was a mansio with its many bedrooms, stables and bustling kitchen, providing an important staging post on the imperial highway to the west. It was somewhere on the road heading south from that mansio that the massive coin hoard was buried, and Matt seems to be a step closer to finding its location.
Philippa, this has just come out
Wow.
of the ground down there. It was just in the subsoil, kind of churned up, kind of leaning up against the structure here.
Well, it's the earliest coin that we found in the past 3 days, definitely.
Oh.
It's an ass, and it's the Emperor Nero.
So what date is that?
That's 64 to 68 AD.
It's pretty precise. So what we've got here is this oval coming round like that, set into this chalk structure. You can see the chalk blocks coming around there, and it looks to kind of be coming to a point round there.
I must admit, looking at the shape, the way it's emerging, Neil, oven is what springs to mind.
You've got potentially then a sort of oven set inside a building, domestic occupation, and probably earlier rather than later, maybe?
I would have thought so, Neil, up here, yeah. So yeah, we're in someone's kitchen.
As Phil heads underground, my questions are on the money. Do you reckon these were buried in panic?
It's a possibility, and that's the traditional interpretation of Roman coin hoards, that they were buried in a time of unrest and then the people would come back and collect them when things had calmed down.
Do you believe that?
Well, it's a possibility, but I think there are lots of other reasons why coin hoards might have been buried.
Like what? Who might have access to this kind of money?
Well, I don't think it's going to be one individual, but money lenders maybe would get this sort of number of coins. Or we could look at this as being a sort of community collection, and that it's been buried for a religious reason and that they've come together to give this all to the gods.
Well, we reckon that's about it.
Think so? It's not very deep, is it? The room's practically at the surface.
Ah, but you've got to remember, the original Cunetio hoard was roofed over with a slab, and that slab probably was at ground level. So this is probably what it looked like.
What are you excavating right there now?
Well, we've got these layers of demolition that come off either side, so the idea is to put a slot down through these, thinking that, you know, there was a chance that they were going to be covering intact floors. But unfortunately, it looks like this is actually build-up and the floors would have been higher, so we've lost them.
So it's certainly a very high-status building, but we're not going to be able to tell just from this one trench.
No, unfortunately not.
The dating evidence for this substantial building points to activity in the 3rd and 4th centuries, the same date as the stone walls, so it's likely to have played an administrative role over the late town. We've had some really fascinating archaeology from all over the site. We've got the Mansio, we've got the big high-status building that Stuart identified, we've got the building where the hoard originally came from, but we keep being drawn back to this trench for one very good reason. This wall. It's huge, isn't it, Mark? It's monumental.
We knew it was big, but to actually now see it exposed is incredible. I mean, you've got the front face there.
Just here?
Yeah. The rear face is here, and then we've got another big foundation beyond that, probably for a gatehouse. I mean, it's absolutely astonishing.
But when this gatehouse was at its apogee, what would it have looked like?
Well, let's go and stand up where we would have been in the middle of the gate. So we're roughly now standing in the middle of the road. You've got a gate that's at least 5 to 6 metres wide. Then you're going to have a great single arch coming up 4 to 5 metres high, The wall itself's going to be 6 to 8 metres high. We've got the block behind us telling us there's a kind of tower structure, so there's probably another story above that. It's very impressive.
When you first pick one of these things up, it seems pretty light, but the more you hold it, the more you can feel its weight in your biceps and, for me, in the small of my back. And yet you guys have been going up and down this field non-stop for 3 days.
Yeah, well, you've just walked about 20 metres.
Yeah.
If you kept going for another 55 kilometres in total, you'd have walked what the team have walked in the past 3 days. I mean, they've collected just short of 500,000 data points and surveyed 27 acres of ground. I mean, it's the biggest survey we've ever done on Time Team.
And the result has been an entire Roman town. Is there anything about it that surprised you or you didn't expect?
There's just so much going on, it's unbelievable. You know, there's the enclosure ditches, the defences, the trackways, the fields, the paddocks, the buildings, a complete plan. And it's coming right through the field, and we've not actually found a limit to the archaeology.
It's quite brilliant. You've actually got 400 years of history on one piece of paper. So our findings suggest that Cannetio began in the 1st century as the Roman army drove a road west. A small settlement grew around a major crossroads, and early in the 2nd century, a mansio developed to cater to passing travellers. Attempts to formalise the town resulted in a gridded street plan, but all that was done away with in the 4th century when town planners slapped down huge walls and cleared the interior, administering the town from the big villa in the corner. All a far cry from the field today. Phil, why do you reckon Cannetio eventually disappeared under the ground, whereas other Roman towns like Cirencester survived?
Well, the way I see it, Tony, probably in the early Romano-British period, you had a perfectly peaceable, prosperous little community thriving here. Everybody going about their local business, minding their own business and getting on perfectly well. And then in the later Roman period, you have the might of bureaucratic, administrative Rome coming here and building this whacking great wall, bringing in their taxation, their administration and all those nasty things. And I reckon that killed the local community. They cluttered off. And then, of course, when the Romans went away, well, the locals didn't want to come back, did they?
Time Team is 100% independent and funded by our incredible fans. Want us to make more episodes? Joining Patreon gives you access to exclusive interviews, 3D models, masterclasses and more. And you get to have your say in the process as we develop new sites.
Meet a real Time Team fan. This is Francis Davis, who lives up here at Skipsea in Blowy, East Yorkshire. And to put it mildly, you're fairly interested in what was going on in this field, aren't you?
Absolutely.
Why? It looks like all your other fields.
Except they ploughed deeper one year and we turned up all these finds.
Which are really fantastic. We've got everything from this prehistoric arrowhead right through to medieval. In fact, Frances was so excited that she paid at her own expense for our GEO-PHYS team, if this doesn't blow away, to have a survey. And as you can see, there's a heck of a lot of activity. So clearly something was going on here. But what exactly? We don't know. This place is an archaeological blank sheet. So Frances has invited us here. And how long have we got to find out?
3 days.
Just 3 days. Well, it's going to be a battle against the wind today because Francis's field here at Skipsea is on the east coast, just above Hull. GEO-PHYS are working as quickly as possible to extend their survey on this ridge of higher ground, while these two trenches give us our first look at what they're detecting. Already just digging through the topsoil is turning up more finds.
Bit of slag, and I reckon that's medieval, the one bit of pottery so far.
I think so as well.
The luckier members of the team are starting work in the incident room.
Francis, what we're going to try and do for you to help you understand what's going on in the field is get all the finds you've had into a timeline so we can see exactly when there's lots of activity going on and when it dies away. But I think, Phil, you've just about gone on top of the prehistoric.
Yeah, I mean, this is lovely little collection of flint. This all came out of the same field.
Within sort of 50 metres either way.
It is
Straight away, Phil can tell Frances that all her flint finds date to the early Neolithic period, around 4000 BC.
What you've actually got is evidence of the first farmers that were actually living in Britain.
But you need an expert eye to appreciate some of them.
It's just been flaked very, very finely at that end. What you've actually got is a little end scraper. It's an actual scraping tool.
For dealing with hides and skins and things like that.
That's right. The other thing that is immediately nice is this lovely little leaf arrowhead.
Phil's able to date this to the Neolithic because the shape of flint arrows changed over time. So why did we put this trench in?
You know, we've got this network of ditches.
Yeah.
We really wanted to get some dating evidence and see what's happening to them. I thought there might be an actual break at this point as well, so that was a good point. It turns out that the strong anomaly is actually an iron spike in the trench there.
This looks modern, but over in the corner of the trench, Bridge has uncovered some burnt stones that obviously need more investigation.
You can see on top of this really big one, it's got lots of heat-affected material, and it's as if hot air's been running across it.
What, through there like that?
Exactly.
Yeah. In terms of dating evidence, the only clue we've found so far is one bit of pottery. Prehistoric?
Yes, that could be Iron Age. In this area, the Iron Age pottery is usually quite coarse, undecorated.
But we've also got things turning up that surely can't be Iron Age.
Come and have a look at this. Look at it.
What, this thing here?
Oh, yeah.
It looks like a piece of old junk, doesn't it?
No, but it's look, listen to that. That's lead, and it's got this big. Well, we obviously got this big bit of iron here.
What, we got a piece of aeroplane?
No, it is not. It's lead.
Really? I don't understand why you're getting a bit excited about it. I mean, it's with some debris that looks pretty late.
Well, I know it does, but at the same time, it's inescapable that there is a ditch running along here, and there's no immediate sign of anything that has been actually cut through to allow this to be put in.
What is the lead thing there, Phil? Is it some sort of vessel or tank or something?
Yeah, it's like a big sort of, well, like a shallow bucket. There's the bottom of it,
yeah,
and there's the rim of it.
Phil's also found bits of a crucible, making him think that this could be a furnace for ironworking. The ditch runs under the furnace, so there are at least 2 periods of activity here. Complicated site, isn't it?
It's great.
Just as Mick predicted, this is looking like a site that's got traces of people living here over thousands of years. GEO-PHYS are excited about their latest results. Yesterday we started with just this small area to go on, then they added this, and now they've extended into this field and discovered the signals are getting busier and stronger. But is their plot showing human activity or just geology? More than ever, what we really need now is some secure dating evidence. And here in Trench 2, it looks like Matt has come up with the goods. Not only can he confirm this GEO-PHYS black line is a large ditch, but he's also discovered the base of what looks like an oven built in the ditch after it had silted up. Most important, though, he's got some dating evidence for us in the shape of lovely large bits of pot.
Francis, I wanted you to see this pottery that Peter's got because you're getting very excited about it, look.
I have it here, Francis. You can see that it's a jar or cooking pot. It's got a nice groove around the inside of the rim for putting a lid in, and even on the outside, the actual soot from the last time it was used to make a meal spilt over the edge and got burnt on. It's 11th century, basically.
Oh, wow.
Either side of the Norman conquest.
So round about the time of the Norman conquest.
You don't see it every day of the week, so...
The Norman Motte and Bailey Castle must have looked something like this, and was positioned here not only to control access along these sand islands, but to provide a lookout against invasion from the sea. It's hard to imagine now, but our site, just across the mere, was next door to the centre of power in Holderness in the 11th century. Now more than ever, I'm really curious to know what was going on here in Francis's field. The question is, can we work it out?
What is it and how old is it? I suppose is
the big question.
Yes. Right, what is it? The clay is quite pink, but it hasn't really been highly fired. It's not fired hard. So I don't think it's a particularly high temperature process. I don't really think it's to do with metalworking. Also, you've got the ash being scraped out that way, and there doesn't look at the moment as though there aren't lots of little bits of fragments of slag in it, are there?
No, not really, no. It's all around. You can see the bags over here.
Well, I think this is just slag that's kicking around the site, and I think this is probably more an organic process, something maybe even just smoking fish, smoking meat, making brine. It's not industrial activity, but there is industrial activity in the area.
So we now know something about this end of our GEO-PHYS plot. We know this was a big field boundary ditch that was open in the 11th century, but later had a clay oven built into the bottom of it. We've also got evidence of other low-temperature processes going on here, most likely to do with salt making. Apparently there have been 3 other lead buckets found in coastal regions in Yorkshire, and they too date to the 10th and 11th centuries. Ours apparently is far superior, because it's been made from just one piece of lead. As a valuable commodity, it's been deliberately folded before being put into the ground, presumably for safekeeping. Only the person who left it never returned to retrieve it.
This is what you've seen so far, and we've extended the survey towards...
Oh, crikey, it just goes on and on and on, doesn't it?
And look, there's this massive... Well, I'm calling it a D-shaped enclosure, which I was getting quite excited about. But then we continued the survey.
Oh, crikey, it's just going on.
It's just unbelievable.
Well, it certainly changes my point of view from out of my kitchen window. Because of thinking what was out here.
I'm just wondering whether it's a
John's never seen anything quite like it. To him, it looks more Iron Age than medieval. So where do we dig to find some answers?
If we're going to get some dating evidence for this sort of enclosure, then I think that would be a good place to go in the first instance.
So trench number 6 gets underway. And it doesn't take long for Rakshar to take off the topsoil and reveal the ditch.
There's this other one at the side.
But can she tell what date it is?
Originally, by the shape of the ditch, we thought that it was Iron Age in shape, but the pottery says otherwise. It's actually medieval.
All the pottery in this trench dates to around the time of the Norman conquest, and there's loads of it, suggesting we must be close to where people are actually living. But not only that, because we aren't finding any later pottery, Stuart thinks we may be discovering a settlement that was given up for farmland by the early 14th century. Because as this aerial photo shows, Francis's field was covered by medieval ploughing.
The coastline is actually quite a relevant part of our story here.
This is apparently the fastest eroding coastline in Britain, with something like 2 metres falling into the sea each year. In medieval times, the coastline was way out here, and we know that several settlements such as Cleaton were recorded as falling into the sea. Did all the people who were living in what's now under the sea tend to move in the direction of Skipsea?
Exactly, that's a critical point, because it's like not only did they have to move and live somewhere else, but they've lost that much agricultural ground. Therefore, on the ground that was left, there's a more intense period of agriculture, and it's that intense period of agriculture we see the physical evidence of in our field. And that's one of the main reasons why Skipsea actually grew up as a settlement. The coastline was retreating.
Our final day, and with no time to waste, we're opening another trench. Its main goal is to find evidence of one of the buildings that was part of the Norman period settlement we're discovering here. GEO-PHYS have added even more to their amazing map of human activity in this field. The problem is, we only have today left to try and make sense of it. This morning, they've moved into the field next door to see if they can find out where the settlement actually ends. But it's a great problem to have. We're discovering a settlement connected with big history, the Norman conquest, an event that had terrible consequences for the people living here who resisted the change.
William the Conqueror came up to the north and brought an army up here, and in the winter he wasted the north. It was called the harrying of the north. He burnt the villages, he burnt their seed corn, which means they're going to starve the next year, and many, many thousands of people died.
And what do we know about the effect all of these changes had on the daily lives of the people who are actually living here?
By the time we come back to Domesday Book in 1086, 20 years after the conquest, the population has fallen to only 7 families, and the value has gone down from £32 to £6 when nothing is happening at all.
So the people using this pottery would have seen a lot of change and a lot of suffering.
Absolutely, yes.
Whether we can fully understand the features we're digging or not, everything has to be recorded so that someone can puzzle over it later.
Oh, haven't got that one.
The archaeology is very complicated and would require a bigger trench to sort it out. But below these medieval ditches, Phil's found something we haven't seen on this site before.
One thing that we have got in this trench is evidence of the earliest occupation on the hill. And it's a circular thing.
Yeah. Phil reckons he's found a curving ditch belonging to an Iron Age roundhouse. A reminder that there's evidence of earlier occupation here, but it's hidden by the later medieval settlement on top.
Terry, I think I've found a brooch.
Oh, that's very nice. No, that is a buckle. This piece is the tongue that fits over this rod-shaped piece.
Wow, okay.
And the strap, you see, comes and fastens around here. And the other end loops underneath.
So it's a belt buckle?
Yes, yes, it's a copper alloy belt buckle with little moulded ends. 12th, 13th century.
There are so many finds here that I can't believe we're not going to find a building. Carenza, meanwhile, is wondering what this settlement was called.
The established view when we arrived here was that Cleaton, the place that's named in the Domesday record but has vanished now, has vanished because it was eroded by the sea. Well, we've now found a settlement of that date over there. Susan says the logical inference is that is the settlement of Cleaton, but Stuart, you're not convinced?
Well, I came across this reference in a document of 1306 which says Nova Haide Burgi de Cleaton, the new harbour for Cleaton. Now, the implication to me there is that the harbour and Cleaton are on the coastline.
Well, yes, I agree that's one interpretation, but I have another one, which is that the settlement itself was further inland and that Cleaton really needed a landing place on the coast. The other reason for thinking this is Cleaton is that all these lands in the southern part of Skipsea parish were called Cleaton lands. Even as late as the 18th century, they were part of the copyhold of the manor of Cleaton. And it seems logical, if we've got this settlement, obviously evidence of some settlement for the dig, inland, that this could be Cleaton.
And in fact, it's on the sort of prime spot. It's the highest point in the parish.
That's right, it's the high ridge in the parish.
I'm just worried we're pinning the tail on the donkey, that we found the settlement, we've got a name, and we're making the two together.
I think we've got the tail in the right place. I'm inclined to agree with Susan.
Well, Stuart may not be sure about the name of the settlement, but he's got plenty to tell Frances about the history of her field. This enclosure map of 1785 shows the shape of the original medieval fields.
Now, if you look at the evidence from the aerial photography, those are the fields of ridge and furrow. They were still surviving when this aerial photograph was taken in the 1940s. There's some more up here, for instance.
Victor's drawing shows the kind of settlement that Stuart believes was here just before the Norman conquest. But he reckons the settlement was abandoned when this field was needed for ridge and furrow ploughing as Skipsea was expanding.
Then, later on, it happens again. In 1765, the Enclosure Bill, imposition of regular fields all across this landscape. The open fields that were part of the ridge and furrow system disappeared. So the field you've got now is like a capsule of all those events in history.
Time's almost up, and after collecting something like 250,000 readings, GEO-PHYS are ready to sit down and report to Frances.
Well, this is how the field was 2 years ago when we first came to do the survey for you, obviously if you ignore the trenches and the cars. And that's what we managed to achieve in the 3 days.
That is totally unbelievable.
I'm still amazed myself. I mean, we've gone into your neighbour's field now and it just continues in all directions. We've not actually been able to find a limit to the site.
Well, I thought there might have been a small village or a small settlement up there, but to actually see that...
Grayson's done some wonders with the graphics, converted the dots and the blobs and so on into the sort of ditches. OK, we haven't got the houses and so on, but that's sort of the first stage towards rebuilding that picture. Then it all disappeared and got covered with the ridge and furrow, the ploughing.
And finally, out in Frances's field, Phil's got some last-minute good news.
Well, Mick, I reckon we got our building.
Yeah?
I really do. I mean, what we got is this kind of, well, this big hollow area.
Yeah.
Which is running from Matt, and the edge is running right round here, so it looks like we got the end of it.
Right.
And then along here we got this definite row of stones. Inside we've also got stones. We've never had stones anywhere else in the site. And along this row of stones, you even got a sort of gravelly core to it as well. Beyond it, we got what looks like a ditch.
Added to that, this ditch is crammed full of finds. confused by all the information you've got, or has it all become crystal clear?
I think it's almost become as clear as mud, but there's just so much, absolutely so much.
Whose evidence really impressed you?
I think GEO-PHYS because they have shown the extent of it, but then the evidence of the fact that we've got the bottom of our pond is 13,000 years old, the end of the last ice age, and we can actually tell what the scenery was like then. But it's just the whole thing is overwhelming.
Time Team is 100% independent and funded by our incredible fans. Joining Patreon gives you access to exclusive interviews, 3D models, masterclasses and more. Please join us on this exciting journey. We need more support to make more episodes.
Trench 1 will confirm if the series of features is actually an enclosure that surrounds some high-status buildings. To pick up these features, it will be one of the longest we've ever dug on Time Team, running over 60 metres from the bottom to the very top of the hill. Trench 2, on the south of the hill, will investigate these interesting GEO-PHYS results. Because so many high-status finds like this 6th century Saxon brooch have been found here in the past, we've also roped in an unprecedented number of metal detectorists to comb not just the spoil heaps, but the whole 3 acres of Highborough Hill.
Andrew!
And after just hours, the strategy's paying off.
I don't know if you can see the look of satisfaction on these people's faces. Some might even say a trifle smug. We never find anything decent halfway through day 1. But Jamie, what happened?
Oh, we've just been doing a metal detecting survey of the area, and this was the first good signal I'd had all morning.
Isn't it beautiful? What is it, Helen?
Well, it's an Anglo-Saxon brooch dating to the 6th century AD. We think it's made of silver, but we'll have to get it cleaned up by a bridge. And look, it's got a garnet on it. You can tell it's a garnet because of the way it flashes and glitters as you move it in the light. It's amazing, isn't it?
Wherever the palace exactly is, Eastry would have been the ideal place to build one. A major Roman road runs through the village, while the coast and port of Sandwich are less than 4 miles away. And the building would have been pretty impressive. Our very own designer and trained architect Ray San is trying to reconstruct one.
I've started making a basic model here of a sort of Saxon hall, and really now I could do with help.
Well, it looks absolutely lovely, but one of the things that does immediately spring to mind is you're going to need a door in the middle of each long wall, and it's going to have to be a door that's higher than the wall because you've got to be able to get through it without banging your head. Quite a prestigious kind of entrance. And the second thing is that I don't think the roof is high enough because we need to be able to accommodate something like a cauldron chain above a fireplace. How long was that, Sam?
Estimated 18 feet, the length of the chain.
Right, and then you've got to have the cauldron and the fire underneath it, so a really high building.
We're talking about a high hall, visible from many miles around, designed to be seen, designed to be impressive, shining out across many lands. It's wonderful stuff.
Finding such a building is a real challenge, with very few examples in the country, let alone in Kent.
It's got to be out there somewhere.
The search means splitting our resources. In Bridges Trench, yet another find only adds to our confusion.
Over here, this iron vessel, that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
But it is sitting in the same material that the Saxon feature over there is cut into.
I mean, this is the problem. Just because it's near something, it doesn't mean it's the same date. I mean, I take your point about it being in the same horizon, but I mean, if it is a whole iron vessel and it is Saxon, then that's very unusual for a settlement site.
But on the other side of the hill, the metal detectorists are adding to their collection.
Tony, look at that, the most brilliant golden object.
Where'd you find it?
Just down there.
Just from metal detectoring?
Yep.
David, could that be Saxon?
It could be, but I'd want Helen to see it. It's just possible it might be more recent.
Tantalising.
It's lovely, isn't it?
Beautiful. Stunning.
Look at that. Isn't that good?
So if the brooch is Anglo-Saxon, did it come from a settlement, a grave, or even a palace? While the jury's out, Mick's still determined to test the theory that the palace may be in the village at Eastry Court. So GEO-PHYS set off to survey David's luscious lawns. Meanwhile, another extraordinary find has been made at Highborough Hill.
Look at this, come on over.
It gives John Gator a reason to feel smug, believing he's won a GEO-PHYS jackpot.
This is a first.
You haven't finally found someone, have you?
That is the first time we've ever found a windmill.
Windmill?
Well, I've been told there's a windmill on top of the hill here.
We are on the top of the hill. Where is it?
If you extend the trench a couple of metres under the digger, what I think you're going to find are the cross pieces, the timber supports for the windmill.
Do we know when it was up here?
Well, some of them are 12th century apparently. It's for you to find out, because if that's the first time we've got a windmill in geophysics, you can buy me a pint.
It comes in cheap. I hope it ain't there then. All right, Ian, let's find the windmill.
After a few hours, John Gator wins his pint off Phil because we do find the cross beams of a windmill that once stood on the hill. But it's medieval and doesn't help us in our quest to understand what the Anglo-Saxons were doing here.
I can't remember a first day on Time Team where we've had so many really good finds. And yet the irony is that we've got no Anglo-Saxon structures, no cemetery, certainly no palace. What's going on?
The thing that I've come up with, which might work, is that I wonder if this isn't a meeting place, one of these moot sites where people gathered for, you know, proclamations and trials and stuff like that.
So what are all the finds?
Well, they are things that get dropped at the time, but there's no structures here.
How do you feel about a moot?
Well, it's quite a radical suggestion for the 5th, 6th and 7th centuries. First of all, I have to look at the finds to see what the breaks look like. Could they have been rolling around in the plough soil for hundreds of years?
If it was a moot hill, what would be its association with the rest of the country round about?
Well, you'd expect there to be, as there was in later times, a central meeting place to serve a big estate. But because it's not permanently occupied, you'd expect the main residence, the hall, the farm buildings, possibly the church, to be somewhere else on that estate.
So where might that be here?
Well, I think in this case it's probably down at Eastry. It's probably down by the church and Eastry Court.
So the answer to what's going here could lie down there?
Yeah. And that's where we should go and work next, I think.
It's the beginning of day 2, and yesterday we were trying to solve the mystery at Highborough Hill up there. How come we were getting all these Anglo-Saxon finds? Could we have a cemetery? Might there be a palace? We certainly weren't coming up with any structures. And by the end of the day, Mick thought that what we might have was a moot hill or meeting place, and all the finds were just things that people dropped when they were meeting each other. But he also thought that the key to the whole mystery might lie not up there, but down here at Eastry Court, where John's been geophysics. Mick, what do you think the link could be between a moot hill and this place here?
Well, you'd expect the moot hill to be the administrative and probably legal centre of a big estate. You'd also expect another centre that was the agricultural centre, probably had the church and that sort of stuff. And I think that's more likely to be down here where the later medieval church is. So somewhere around here is where I'd expect the early centre to be.
Yeah, but what do you expect us to find under the gardens? That's my problem.
I think right here, there's going to be bits more of this medieval building. We know this is a medieval hall inside. There's going to be other structures going with that in either stone or timber. I would also probably expect burials because the graveyard probably was bigger, came further out from the church. And then under that, there could be Saxon buildings and stuff as well. So I think there's probably a whole sandwich of stuff somewhere in this area.
But it's not just the landscape that suggests there was a palace here. There's also a legend of persecution and treachery. In fact, our earliest reference to a palace in Eastry comes from the 670s, from a story of royal betrayal and bloodshed.
David, as soon as Sam knew that we were coming here, he went, "Oh great, there was a murder here, a murder." What was it?
A royal murder of two princes, Athelbert and Athelrad, two princes of Kent, murdered by their cousin. Undoubtedly the background story is dynastic feuding. And he murders them secretly at night and thinks he's got away with it. by burying them in the King's Hall, but because of shafts of light that radiate out, the murder is revealed.
So what's this white light all about?
It's an indication of a miracle. It's a miracle light, God's light, and it means that we've got saints.
So it's like a Hammer horror, that the light comes on and suddenly,
yes.
it wasn't me, Chief.
Exactly.
Interestingly, the bodies were moved to the chapel. And if the medieval chapel is on the remains of an earlier chapel, we're now sitting bang on where the two princes were buried.
So there could be a pair of little innocent, sweet, darling princes buried somewhere under these flagstones.
Unfortunately, you won't find the murder victims because we know from the Saints' Light tradition that they were translated to Ramsey in Huntingdonshire.
So no bodies?
Almost certainly not, but you might find the murder weapon, perhaps.
Oh, I like that idea. All morning, the diggers up on the site have been saying, is it Saxon, is it Victorian? Helen, you're the specialist. What is it?
Well, it is actually Victorian. There's a few things that give it away. The really big giveaway is a soldier on the back. The Victorians added separate fixings to their brooches, and the Anglo-Saxons didn't, especially not on a gold piece. Secondly, ovals in plain wire, wrong. Should be twisted beaded wire on something Anglo-Saxon. But the real clincher, the most obvious thing is on these balls around here, they're dented, so they're hollow. Anglo-Saxons did not make things with hollow gold balls on them. Everything was solid. So I'm afraid it is Victorian.
What I don't understand is there must have been 20 trained archaeologists out there, thousands of pounds of taxpayers' money invested in their education, and yet everyone was really tentative about whether or not it was modern or Anglo-Saxon. Why?
Well, I did my PhD on this kind of thing and I still was a bit nervous about it. It's because until it's cleaned up you can't see the details, and both the Victorians and the 7th century Anglo-Saxons are both copying Roman designs of jewellery. They were both trying to look as classical as they could, and both doing pretty well actually, so ultimately they are going to look very similar.
But at least Matt has found some evidence of a structure at the bottom of Trench 1.
Matt, what do you think this is now?
Well, we've got down to the top of this chalk, and it looks basically it's a road of some sort. A huge flint nodules have been packed in the bottom, and then chalk has been tamped down all the way across it. But the strangest thing about it, it's like that deep so far.
Half a metre.
A really solid road, yeah.
So what kind of road might that be?
Well, let me show you one that was dug up in Yorkshire that I think really sort of explains what we've got. And there they had a hollow way that had worn out over the years with cattle and people walking along its side. It got so deep and presumably so boggy that in the end they decided to put a properly built road of boulders and stones in the bottom of it. And I think that's probably what we've got here. We've got a hollow way, which has then been reinforced with a new road built up. And I think they're probably doing it because this is probably going up to the mill on the top of the hill.
By the middle of day 2, Highborough Hill hasn't revealed any more of its Saxon past. In fact, apart from a high-status brooch, the finds on the hill have been almost entirely prehistoric and medieval. Despite the lack of evidence from the trenches, Stuart's still banging on that the garden is in a royal enclosure.
Stuart, all day you've been saying, we're in the right place, we're in the right place. We've dug loads of trenches now, and we haven't found the palace.
And I'm going to carry on saying we're in the right place. Now, if you look at this photograph we took from the helicopter, this is the area of the enclosure. There's the church there. This bit I've highlighted in white, that actually survives on the ground. It's a footpath now.
But what makes you think that just because we've got a bit that's extant there, that there were all those other bits there?
Because they're continued in the mapping. You can see their boundaries are continued through the different generations of maps, and they still exist to this day.
Why so much space? It's a very big enclosure for a relatively small palace.
Yeah. I think that's, again, designed for status reasons. You know, you want your buildings to look impressive with lots of open space around them. Rather like, you know, Buckingham Palace isn't hemmed in with lots of other buildings. It's got nice spaces around. It emphasises the dramatic size of the buildings in the middle.
But if the Royal Saxon enclosure and palace are in Eastry village, and Mick's right that there is a Saxon ritual centre on Highborough Hill, could the two be related?
I've started to mark them up in pink coming through here. In fact, you can see one of them over there, going through the middle of those yellow fields of rape.
The green?
The green road, yeah. And there's another one crossing over the hill over there, that green hedge line coming over the top.
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting about one of these roadways, this one here, it actually goes right by Highbury Hill, i.e. Highbury Hill is on a major routeway, so a mixed idea of a meeting place.
Makes sense, because it would have been on a road, yeah.
We've also got another one which comes out of the corner of this enclosure at Eastry, and it heads out the back and actually takes you up towards Highbury Hill. I think Highbury Hill is on a major network of roads, but also we've got a connection between this enclosure and Highbury Hill itself.
And remember that bit of road that Matt found on the hill earlier in the day? Thanks to Stuart, we now think this very road is part of the one that runs between the hill and the enclosure. In the 7th century, a community would have thrived here in Eastry. Near a Roman road and the coast, it would have been an important and powerful centre for East Kent. High-status finds on Highbury Hill led us to think the palace was there. We now think it was an Anglo-Saxon ritual centre, where valuable offerings were made, roads, linking it with an Anglo-Saxon centre at Eastry village. We now believe that it was somewhere in the village that the palace was once built, inside a royal enclosure with Eastry Court, the church and recreation ground at its heart.
Hello, my name's John Gator. Time Team is fan-funded by Patreon. This vital support helps us to make new episodes. Joining Patreon gives you access to exclusive interviews, 3D models and masterclasses, plus lots more.